All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am so excited for our guest today because we have none other than Dave Rosenberg from Locked On Leadership here today. And we're going to be, Dave is an accountability expert, and we're going to see why shortly. But we're going to be talking about the keys to creating a culture of accountability in your business. Dave, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Damon. By the way, I was just starting to dig your intro music, and all of a sudden it cut away, man.
Yeah, I know. We can't go too long because we'd just be going. We'd be going. But Dave, it is awesome to have you here today. And as we always like to start out the show, let's talk a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into what you're doing today.
Sure. It's been a long road. I'll keep it brief. It starts with I chose to be an engineering major, why is that important? It's important because I had no clue what I was doing. I was good at math. I had no idea what an engineer was. So I'm in school trying to figure out what I'm going to do in my life. And a buddy of mine, and I always wanted to be an astronaut. That's the truth. I just, since I was a kid reading science fiction, I'm like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And I wore glasses, and a buddy of mine it said to me, hey, you ought to be a naval aviator because more naval aviators have been astronauts. This is back in the 80s than any other way. There's no career path, but seems to be the best way in.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, I wear glasses. I can't fly. He goes, no, you could be a naval flight officer. What's that? So all those of you who saw Top Gun, that's what Goose did, right? We didn't actually have the flight controls. And so I thought, So I go to a recruiter. Next thing I know, I'm in the Navy. So that sort of was the start for me. Did 7 years. I was able to do an operation. I was there for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And we spent 111 fun days at sea without a port call while that thing was building up. And I get out and I go into business. And this is where my eyes really opened up because in the military, there is training for everything. And my first management job was sales manager, and I'm supposed to build this sales department from scratch. And there wasn't a manual to be found.
Yes.
So I wrote one. I'm like, okay, doesn't exist. Make it. It's one of the things I learned in the military. And because I wanted to be able to have an effective way of teaching people how to do what I did. And I didn't want to forget stuff. I'm kind of lazy that way. I didn't want to have to think about it. So I wrote it down. And then as I would start, training people and I'd realize, there's a better way to do it, I would revise the manual. Long story short, left that job, moved on to another company where I ended up getting promoted to VP of operations. Same story. So once again, I started creating manuals, and I realized really quickly that manuals are key to having consistent results. And that became a hallmark of my career as I worked for other people. And I ended up running 4 companies, a couple of which were mine, a couple of which were other people's as president. And every time I walked in, it was the same thing. We had inconsistent results because people were learning over people's shoulders. And I started creating manuals and processes and procedures, again, because that's how I learned in the military.
Yeah.
And I started seeing people improving. And then I noticed something else. Not only did they give better results, they had better attitudes. And fast forward to 2015, the company I had been running was sold. I was president of the company. It was a moving company. And I'm out on my own trying to figure out, now I'm north of 50, trying to figure, what am I going to do next? Look for another job. I got to look for another high-level job. It's going to be a year. I'm just setting my wife up for this. Look, it's going to be a while. I got to find the right job. It's not, yada, yada, yada. And a friend of mine, so a guy, when I was in telecommunications, one of the businesses I owned, became friends with a guy. We were friendly competitors. He was a managed service provider who did telecom. I was a telecom company that provided MSP services. And after I sold my business, I used his for running some company or running the IT piece of some companies I was in. And he asked me, he said, can you come work for me? It was a $500,000 company. And I'm like, you got to give up a significant part of your revenue. That's not going to work. So he said, well, can you at least help me and my wife? And I thought, I'll get some income while I figure out what next is. So I started consulting for him. And then I thought, you know what? I can get another job working for somebody else until their kids come in after they graduate from business school and take it over, or they sell it, which is what happened to the last one.
Mm-hmm.
In 4 or 5 years, I'm going to be doing this all over again. I don't want to do that. So I started coaching consulting, and I just did it under my name at first.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that the piece that was missing is leadership. And so I started on what I call tactical leadership. What are the day-to-day activities that people need to engage in to elevate their team members? And as I started working on and developing this, I ended up writing a book about it, ended up speaking on stage. And, now I go around, I speak to conferences and conventions. And the one piece that everybody commented on was my section on holding people accountable. And back then I was just focusing on that accountability conversation.
Yeah.
And I realized this is where people struggle. And as I developed it more and more, I came to the conclusion that people are saving the accountability conversation to the end. And my success came from creating cultures where people held themselves accountable, right? Instead of saying, you did something wrong, let's talk about it. You went, I did something wrong. How do I fix this? Right. And that's a whole different dynamic. And so the concept of what I now call radical accountability was born. And I mean, that's the 30-second answer. Well, probably more than 30 seconds, but that's the path that got me where I am today. And so now I help organizations develop a culture where people willingly do what they need to do when they need to do it correctly the first time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're going to get into that, Dave, because that is a great base to start with. I just want to say, Usman, thanks for stopping by today. He said greetings to us today. Thank you for doing it. He said, nice to meet you. That's best wishes. Thank you so much, Usman, today for being here. So I tell you what, Dave, it's like sometimes things just align, because we were talking about some leadership things with one of my clients today. I was actually on site with them. And this is going to be a very interesting conversation, because you said one thing towards the end of here, radical accountability. First of all, I love that phrase. You talked about the other thing you talked about is the military and the military having processes, and then coming into the private sector and that not being something that was commonplace, you helping to instill that, which is something else I think we're going to get into a little bit, because that is one of the things that founders, visionary leaders that start companies, they don't really understand the importance of what you said there at the beginning, is the manuals or a process that's actually documented in some way, shape, or form that gives people the knowledge, so they know this is what I am supposed to be doing. And if I do this 10 times every day, I've done a good job. And you talked about people where they got better results, but the attitudes, because I think a lot of businesses suffer from not having a process documented, so that people don't understand what a good job is. So they can't feel good themselves knowing they did a good job, because they don't know what a good job is.
Yeah. And it's actually, you're spot on, right? So if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is really what drives all of us to everything, because it's just a statement of our need to survive, right? And having processes sits right at that safety and security level, which is the second level. So physiological needs is the first thing. We'll take any risk if we're going to die. If we can't eat, drink, we'll take any risk to solve that. But once we've established that, and that's what getting hired does, by the way, it solves the physiological need issue. The next one is safety and security. And if I don't know what you expect of me, then I'm in this uncertainty, and I'm like, oh, what do I do? How am I know? I'm always worried. And so I can't then achieve the next level, which is love and belonging. I don't even care about that. And that's where a team start to form.
Yes.
And so processes, so it's several things required to do that. And you've hit on them, right? So one is great job descriptions, accurate job descriptions. There's a study out that shows that what's called job discrepancy, which is the difference between what the job description says and what the bosses expect. And the greater that delta, that difference, the more stress that creates. And that's all sorts of bad things for us, right? Because stress creates, you release cortisol. The brain actually shuts down in a stress environment and goes to fight or flight or freeze, right? Or fawn I just heard that, flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. So that's the sycophant. Oh yes, boss, wherever you want, right? Okay. The flight is the people who duck around the corner and hide. Freeze are people who won't make a move without the boss telling them what to do because they're too afraid of making a mistake. And then the fight are the guys who argue all the time. It's not the right way, blah, 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 right? So we need those to be accurate so people know what to expect. We need metrics, which you alluded to, how many a day? What's good enough? Just give me the basement. What's good enough? Because most people are competitive. We're going to want to at least do that much. And the beauty about that is you'll see who the real go-getters are. And they're the ones who are doubling your good enough, right? And now you know who your future leaders potentially are. And you also know you can improve your process because somebody's doing it better. And then that's the last piece, show them how to do it with not just good processes, but then, and the process need to be written in formal, but formal training, which actually does double duty, because then in the future, when somebody doesn't do well, and they can't say, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do it that way. You go, yes, you did, because we went through the training and you passed the test. It's a win-win-win when you do that. Now people feel good because they feel ready. They're like, I'm equipped to do my job. And that kicks in a well-known survival mechanism called reciprocity. See, when we were hunter-gatherers, we depended on each other. So you do for me and I do for you. And you think about my closest friend asked me he was injured. He couldn't do so. He asked me to change a lock on his mailbox. He insisted on buying me lunch. Come on. I've known this guy for over 30 years. The stuff we've done for each other, you can't even count. Of course I'm going to help you out. He's my bro. But he insisted on buying lunch. That's reciprocity, that innate human instinct that we help each other out. And so when you train people, the way they reciprocate is doing a good job.
Ooh, that's good. I've not heard that before. By training people, you're doing them a solid by getting them set up right, doing what they need to do. So they're going to try to do a good job. The whole piece in not taking the time to document processes and train people properly is such a waste in our organizations today that I think that simple step alone can help so many small businesses. They don't even realize the benefits they would get from that.
It's not just small, but it is definitely small businesses. And I will tell you, I used to think, oh my God, enterprise, enterprise is just a bunch of small businesses all contributing together, but they are set up exactly the same with the exact same issues.
Yeah. Wow. So as you're coming around into accountability, one of the things that I love the term radical accountability. And I love that you build we're talking about building a culture of accountability today. One of the things that I see in organizations is finger pointing. And how do you build a culture of accountability that, as you said earlier, where someone will say, I didn't do what I needed to do, rather than somebody else pointing out a problem and finger pointing all the time. It's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault, or those kind of things, where you really get that sense of, hey, I didn't do it. I know I didn't do it. I need to say something, and we need to figure it out.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are three elements that I've identified required to create radical accountability, the culture of accountability. I call this the triad of accountability. We've discussed the first one, which is the mechanics. And mechanics are all the processes procedures, everything we just discussed, the things that set people up success so they know mechanically what to do, how much to do, how to do it. The second is mindset. And it starts with, why does your company exist? And I'm going to put you, I know you're interviewing me, but I'm going to put you on the hot spot here, David. Why does your company exist?
Because I want to help thousands of business owners lead a better life. I mean, that's honestly what it is. Drives me every day.
Yeah. And I get that. And I love that. And so what is your mindset right there? It is about other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, so sometimes I was in BNI years ago and, why do I exist? And everyone's laughing here because it's small business people. We all know that. And it's a great organization. Ivan Meisner's a great guy. He's brilliant in what he did.
Yeah.
Nothing about here should ever be heard about slanting BNI. And at the same time, I would get people get up and they'd say, "Why? Here's why." And they do their presentation, the whatever, however, and they'd be like, "Here's why I'm doing it." And they're showing their family, right? Which is okay. That's somewhat outside, right? But it's kind of me centered.
Yeah.
Nobody pays anybody to do anything because they need to make money.
Mm-hmm.
We pay other businesses because they bring us value, meaning they do something for us we can't do for ourselves. That's the economic exchange. That's the promise of the economic exchange. I buy a service from you or a product from you for however much money I pay for it. The value to me is more than the amount I pay for it. And of course, the value to you as the seller is less than the amount you're getting. That's your profit, right? And it's a win. It's a true win-win scenario. If I don't understand why I'm in business, how I support other people, right? Then I'm going to make decisions based on what's good for me, not what's good for them. And I ran a kitchen and bathroom modeling company where the owner thought that way. It used to drive me nuts. And we'd have a problem. We'd put in a kitchen. It would be a problem. And he would do what's best for him to solve the problem instead of what's best for the customer. And he ended up going bankrupt, right? Because that's what happens.
Yeah.
Right? So first start with, why are you in business? And I would go even bigger picture. Like I talk to plumbers, for example. Why are plumbers in business? Plumbers actually built civilization.
Yeah.
Civilization would not exist without plumbers. Think about that. What if you're advertising for a job and that's your message? We help civilization grow. If we didn't have running water, if we didn't have sewage, if we didn't have cisterns and we didn't have irrigation, we don't have civilization.
Mm-hmm.
That's freaking huge.
Yes, it is.
So you start with that, but then you have to inculcate the mindset in everybody about how their actions affect their stakeholders. Okay, so your clients, that's why you're in business is important, because you want to hire people who are excited by that reason. And then you say, listen, you don't do this right. Here the people are suffering and you're here to help them. People won't let that happen. Oh, and by the way, here's how your actions or inactions affect the rest of your team. Well, again, we go back to primal needs. We don't want to let the tribe down. Maslow's hierarchy. So the fourth level of Maslow's hierarchy is esteem. So the second level, the third level is love and belonging. That means we have this need to belong to a group. We are pack animals. But once we're in that group, which provides us safety, by the way, right? Because there's safety in numbers, we want to stay in that group. And that's done by esteem, which is not self-esteem. Oh, how do I feel about me? No. How do you, as my teammate, feel about me? Am I contributing? Because if I'm not, what are you going to do? You're going to get rid of me, because otherwise I'm taking resources and being, right? So I need to know that you value me. So when we talk about mindset and how others are affected, we tap right into that.
Yeah.
And then last is model. And this is the piece that probably most leaders don't understand, which is their team will never behave any different than they do. Leaders must model the behaviors they want to see from others. They must set the example. That's why they are leaders. They are leading the way. Lead by example. Be that person. When you do that, naturally the group will become self-correcting. When the leader models taking ownership, you know what, guys, I was working with a client the other day and they're changing their culture. And they're like, well, how do we come about making this change? So the first thing you do is you apologize to your team for not having done this sooner. that we realize we've made all these mistakes, that by not having policies and processes in place, one of the things they avoided doing is putting policy. We don't want to get pigeonholed. And I hear this all the time. We need to be more flexible. I don't want to force myself in a box. What if a situation comes up? Or what if we have to change the policy? I'm like, we have a policy or procedure on how to change procedures. That's easy, right? But you want to give people the guardrails so they know how to make decisions. And so the first thing I had them do is say, listen, guys, here's some changes that are going to come on. We're going to come out with some new policies and procedures to give you some guardrails. And they haven't existed because of us. We screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
As leaders, if we don't own our mistakes, no one in the team will. That's where it starts.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference, because if you have to be human, right? And then this is something, honestly, has kind of been talked about, but I think in the last 10 years has really come about a lot more as leaders, and being more human about, yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we don't know everything. Yes, because when you build that team around you and they know that you're as leaders, first of all, we should be getting people a lot smarter around us than we are, first thing. But the second thing is when you are that way and you're able to model that behavior, other people want, because you've helped them go, with the training and everything else that you're doing, they want to help you succeed as much as you want everyone to succeed around you.
Yeah, you've nailed it. Brene Brown brought this to the public attention, right? She's arguably the leader of the vulnerability movement, for lack of a better term. But we need to be vulnerable, right? We just need to do it. You're right. People will relate to you if you're human. If you're that, Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the Enterprise, and even if you watch the show, he evolves as a character to admitting, asking for help, all of that. But in the beginning, so especially early, he's like, I know it all, sort of thing. No, this is what we're going to do. I couldn't relate to that character, and you can't relate to that person as a real person if they're doing that. And if I can't relate to you, I can't trust you.
Yes.
And now if I can't trust you, I'm down at that safety and security level again, going like, I don't know which way's up. I don't know. Is my job safe? Is my job secure? I'm just going to keep my head down. And I'm not going to be innovative. I'm not going to stand out. I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to lose my job.
Yeah, you just brought up a couple of things. You're exactly right. If there again, they have to be able to trust you, relate to you, and trust you as a leader to be able to really perform at their best. So one of the things that I would have to imagine, I want to have you talk about this, is what are some of the reasons that people say they don't want to look at creating cultures of accountability?
I tend to work with people who actually do want to create cultures of accountability. The ones that don't tend to avoid me, but even with the ones who do, right? One of the questions I frequently ask is, well, how come you haven't? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot is fear of being held accountable themselves by their team. That is way up there as probably one of the top one reasons. It's probably the number one reason.
Yes.
If I hold you accountable, then I have to do what I say. And God, I like being the boss and showing up late, or not showing up when I said I was going to, or not starting a meeting on time, or just blowing off the day and going and playing golf. Okay, great. You like it? You can have it. Build your team up so somebody else takes that role from you, and you're not involved in a day-to-day of the company. As you grow a business, your role becomes less important if you do it properly in the day-to-day. The people who get to that size where they're like, I don't want to grow anymore because I don't have enough hours in the day, they're not doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. And that you make a great point, because those visionary founders are usually the ones that have trouble with accountability, so that they see that in themselves. But what they don't realize is that a lot of other people in the organization want that. They want to be accountable.
One of the things I say frequently is we only hold people accountable we think are capable. Think about this for a second. If do you have, I mean, I realize your kids are probably grown now, but do you have children?
Yes. Yes.
So when boys, girls,
Each.
okay, so when your son was about 5 years old, he probably thought mowing the lawn was really cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he wanted to mow the lawn.
Hmm.
And if you had let him mow the lawn, and of course there'd be areas where he would have missed,
Hmm.
right? Because he's only 5. Are you yelling at him for not getting all the grass, not doing straight lines, not getting the edging just right? Of course not. He's a 5-year-old. He's not
Hmm.
capable of doing it. At 15, whoa, 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 son. Before you go out with your friend, you're going to do this right because he's
Hmm.
capable. When we fail to hold people accountable, we're telling them we don't think they're capable. Is that
Yeah.
the message you want to send?
No. I mean, it all. I love the topic of accountability because you've explained it so well today. When people know what they're supposed to do, starting back at the beginning, when you talk about in business, having a process, Damon knows what he's supposed to do every day. And he knows if he does it 10 times every day, he's doing what we expect. And then if he only does it 7 times, he would like someone to come up and ask him why he only did it 7 times that day instead of 10 like he was supposed to.
Yeah. And maybe there's a legit reason, like the process is broken down someplace or some
Yes.
flaw in the process. And when you ask him that, I ask you that and you point that out to me, and I go, wow, we have a chance to improve the process.
Yep.
Right. So it allows you to iterate and improve. It also allows you under high stress situations to perform. I mentioned to you in the pregame, I'll call it, that I have this upcoming travel retreat. I call it
Yes.
Command
Talk about
Expedition.
that.
Yeah, but it fits right in here. So our first one, so we're going to be traveling twice a year to various battlefields, and it's going to be leadership lessons from iconic battlefields. The first one is Battle of London. It's more than just Battle of London, but we're going to England and start with Battle of London. It's going to end with the beginning of D-Day. Okay, and
Wow.
it took Eisenhower and his staff 3 years to plan the D-Day invasion, and for about a year there were people training on how to embark and disembark and all the various things they needed to do to storm the beaches at Normandy. They trained forever, and no aspect of that was left to chance. Having said that, there was a ton of chance because no plan
Yes.
survives contact with the enemy, as they say, right? But the other thing Eisenhower said is in combat, I've found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Right.
Hmm.
So the planning, the training, all of that sets people up for success. And we know how successful, obviously, D-Day was because I'm not having this conversation in German.
Yes. Yes. That planning is even when you talk about that, and even as we all know in business and life, the best made plans, as you said, don't survive very long on the battlefield. But people that are better prepared make better decisions in those battles, I believe, because they're more capable of making a different decision.
Right. So here's basically what happens, and this has been so invaluable to me as a civilian because I learned this in the military. Um, you first of all, planning is a skill unto itself. So the more you plan, the better you become at planning. So now when something happens, you have to alter the plan. You're good at doing that, even if it's on the fly. You're still planning, right? You're not from the hip. It's just a really quick planning. In fact, the Marines have this rapid planning thing they do all the time because the balloon goes up, the bubble bursts, you're like, oh my god, we didn't expect this. If you talk to any operator, special forces guys, they call themselves operators,
Hmm.
when things go wrong, the first thing they do is stop and assess the situation. They develop a plan very, very quickly. So the act of planning teaches you how to plan. But the other piece that comes up is usually it's not the entire plan that goes to heck.
Hmm.
It's just a piece of it. If you don't have a plan, you don't know how to adjust. But when you have a plan, you can adjust for it. There's one other piece, though, that most people don't get. For us in business where we deal with the same things, it's not as dynamic as a combat situation. Depending on the industry, between 75 to 85% of your scenarios are the same. So your plan covers, worst case, 75% of everything. Of that 25% that's left, 75% of that is a variant, right?
Mhm.
So what's that? It was 75% of 25% is something like 18% roughly, right? So now we've got 93% covered by two scenarios. That next 7%, 3/4 of that is covered by a third scenario. You got 99% of all your scenarios with three variations.
Wow.
Anyone could come up with three variations.
Mhm.
Right? And so that's how you start getting consistent results.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it and the importance of planning. And wow, I had no idea that they planned for 3 years ahead of D-Day. That obviously a very big time, and the planning was necessary and beneficial. That's for sure. That
Yeah.
preparation, for sure. We have Robert stop by to say important discussion you're steering here. And then Muhammad said he's excited to join the session on creating a culture of accountability, and building accountability is such a key driver for team motivation and sustainable growth. That's I really think that when you see teams that work together, that they understand their own responsible for their own performance, right? For I'm part of the team, I have to take care of this is my piece. We've been trained, I know what my piece is. When it doesn't happen right, they're already figuring out in their mind how not to let it happen again a lot of times, and they don't want to let the rest of their team members down.
You've just summed up what I just said in 45 minutes in about 2 minutes.
Well, I think you're going to see a culture of accountability is a beautiful thing, because you can have, honestly, and I'll just say it, a shitstorm.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just made a bad mistake, and it wasn't intentional, but it was just a bad mistake happened. And you see everyone come around them, lift them up, help them to figure out what happened. There's not finger pointing. There's not anything like that. It's like, we're all part of this team. We trust each other on this team. We know we're all here to do the right thing. They fix it and they move on.
Yeah. And that's why we say it's the team's success. The success belongs to the team.
Yeah.
That's simple, because that's exactly how it works. Everyone has a part. Everyone does their part. And if there's a failure, in my world, that belongs to the leader, because it's our job as leaders to ensure success. So when there isn't success, we fit. That's what our role is, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that comes back again to that accountability, because a leader takes ultimate accountability for their people.
Yep. The buck stops here, as Truman once said.
Yes. Yes. Well, Muhammad asked another question. He said, what's an unconventional approach you've seen for fostering accountability when traditional methods fall short?
Well, it's traditional methods, unconventional. I think everything I described is unconventional in the sense that it's just not implemented. I think it's the only sensible approach to it. It's the only thing that works, and it's what I've done is, frankly, just looked at history and looked at what's worked and synthesize it down into an approach that people can now adopt with a system. So, that's a really difficult question. What's unconventional? Take accountability for yourself. Start with you. And you don't have to be the boss to be the leader. You set the example. And when you do that, hold yourself to your true values, not the values you think people. What are your real values? Start with know your real values, and then live those values. You start there, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So as you're working with companies, you're helping them, really embrace this culture of accountability. and they really get into it. What are some of the things that they tell you that are discoveries that they didn't really understand, didn't think would be happening? What are some side effects, positive side effects that you hear, and things that they just come up to you and say, wow, I would have never thought?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably the first most important one is people think that process, procedures, policies, um, a written framework for making decisions like that allow people to know is constricting, and it's actually liberating. That's number one. I do this exercise with my clients where I say, I want you to draw me something. And my clients, for the most part, they're not artists. Every now and then there is, right? And you kind of get this blank look. You go, come on, anything in the world. I don't know where to begin. So I put constraints on them. I say, just using a pencil, I want you to draw a pet that you've owned in your life. All of a sudden, it becomes much easier to create because I put some boundaries around them, and now they get creative. So when we start creating these boundaries, we actually foster creativity. And
Yeah,
that's usually a shock.
that would be. But you're right. When you have too many possibilities, you can't make a decision. But when you limit the possibilities, it's much easier.
Yeah, it's why Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy in the great book 10x is greater than 2x. That's exactly the concept there, right? As soon as you decide I want to massively grow, the number of options you have goes really narrow. And it's like, I can see my way to do this. I can see this 10x path because I don't have all these other possibilities. Right? The more constraints, the more creative.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. So, what are some specific tools you use to measure accountability? You help to implement, instill, show your clients how to use.
Yeah, I actually have created my own radical accountability assessment, a team assessment. It's super, super powerful. And so we measure on the three elements: mechanics, mindset, and model. And what we do is we go out to the team. It's not. I'm not asking the boss. It's not a self assessment. I have a different self assessment, so which bosses can use for themselves if they're going to be honest. But this is really a great look for the team to see. Where is it we're short? What are we missing? So it asks things like, is does your boss ask you to do things that are unwilling to do? Again, a great example. I have a client who I've known him for many years. He was complaining about lateness, people being late at work. And I said to him, I said, so do you start every meeting you have on time? No, I'm the boss. Do you ever call an impromptu meeting for something that's not vitally important, meaning it's not like there's an emergency, we need to deal with it now, but you just feel like talking about it now? So you disrupt somebody's plan for their day because you feel like it?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm the boss. When you ever wake up and not show up to work when you said you were going to be there because something else came up? Yeah, I'm the boss. Okay, so you don't respect your team members' time. How is it you expect them to respect yours? Right.
Yeah.
So these are the sort of things that come out in the assessment, and that's pretty eye-opening. And
Yeah.
then, I've developed a model of 4 different levels of leadership. And so this will tell where you sit in there.
I bet this leads to a lot of leadership self-discovery.
It does. Probably the one thing most people don't realize is our job as leaders, our leadership strategy is to grow people. Our business strategy is to grow our business, right? But we want to grow people as leaders. And so if we hire people who have the chance to become self-actualized, again, to use Maslow's term, right, who would get excited because it's doing what they feel like they're born to do in whatever business you're in, and then have to set up the pathway for growth so they can be better forms of themselves. That's what our job is. Well, if we go back to my model, in order for other people to grow, you need to lead the way and grow ourselves. And that's the piece that scared the bejesus out of folks.
I'm just going to give us a moment of silence there, because that is great that you brought that up like that, because one of the things that I think as people progress in their career, that it's real easy to stop your continued development. And even to the point to where we get so engulfed in our business and what we're doing in business and what we're doing right there, that we don't step back and say, if I want something for me to change tomorrow, I better be changing who I am today so we can get there tomorrow. And you bring it up so eloquently, because that part of leadership is something that like you said, they need to model the behavior. My behavior is not where we ultimately want to be. So my behavior has to keep changing and developing so that everyone else comes behind me.
I literally, and no hyperbole here, on a daily basis, ask myself, who do I need to be to have the effect I want to have? I'm on a mission to make radical accountability a global movement. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Who do I need to be? I will tell you right now, the guy you're interviewing right now, he is not capable today of creating that global movement. What he is capable of doing, I'm talking about myself in a third person, which I always laugh at when people, what Dave is capable of doing. What I am capable of doing is starting that process.
Yeah.
And growing into it. But
Mm-hmm.
who I need to be, every day I ask myself that question. Every day I think about it and inculcate more of those qualities.
Yeah.
And if we do that, how much better would the world be if everybody not try and be me, God forbid. One of me is more than enough. One of you is right. We're all unique. But if each one of us tried to take our unique selves and make us a higher, better version, I think a lot of the world's ills would disappear.
Yes, they would. Yes, they would. So so you've got a couple things coming up. We briefly spoke about your travel retreats. That's something that I think is awful cool. The first one you said is going to be around the Battle of London, and let's talk about that just briefly.
Yeah, it's September of 25, so a year, just under a year from now.
Yeah.
I've just finished putting the itinerary together. It's 7 days in London. We'll go to Canary Islands, as mentioned. We'll some custom. So what we're going to do on a daily basis, we're going to have some little training in the mornings, set our intentions. What is it that I hope for you to experience each day? Of course, your personal growth will be yours. So I'm always shocked by what people get. I go into these things with thinking, here's the major point I want to get, and what people get is something completely different, but it's exactly what they need. So I've become humble enough to go, I don't really know, right? But it's going to be transformative. I can tell you that much.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll learn, discover what Churchill did, what Eisenhower did. We're actually going to head to the not the Canary Islands, the Channel Islands, because they were occupied by the Germans, uncontended, and so there's a whole bunch of lessons there. And how did Churchill keep his country together in the worst, darkest times of their history and get people to step up and do what on my signature, there's a quote. I love this quote. It's from Churchill. It says, sometimes doing your best is not enough. Sometimes you have to do what's required.
Yeah.
I literally get choked up every time I verbalize that, because that's the sentiment that I think we all need to inculcate. Just do what's required to help each other. And he did that. So how did he do it? We're going to discover that, as well as how to take that back and transform your team so they do that as well. So that's the first one. I do have the second one following up. It took 3 years to plan the invasion of Normandy. I'm doing it in 6 months. So that'll be the second one. That'll be like June of 26. Beyond that, we go into battlefields all over the world twice a year. So if you want more information, get on my newsletter on a website. I'll be coming out in the next 2 months, probably with all the fine detail that you'll need to know about that.
Nice. Well, Dave, if someone wants to talk to you about these travel retreats, or about you coming and speaking at their corporation, or just reaching out to talk to you more about maybe some coaching, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So what I'd like you to do is go to my website, lockedonleadership.com, LOCKEDON, leadership.com/newsletter. sign up for my newsletter. And I send out great information. Right now it's twice a month. I might be increasing that to once a week, but right now it's twice a month. It goes out. And on the thank you page, you'll also be able to download some resources for military-minded leaders. There's, first of all, a 20-page white paper on radical accountability, so a little more in-depth information. The leadership assessment I alluded to is up there, as well as getting a copy of my book. If you want to reach out to me on the website, Dave@lockedonleadership.com, or just contact me on the website, and we can schedule some time together, find out what's going on with you.
All right.
I think there's a scheduling link on that thank you page as well. Yeah, there is a scheduling link on that thank you page as well. If you want complimentary 30 minutes, we'll just sit down and chat.
All right. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Dave. And again, for those listening, I want to say thank you. We were talking with Dave Rosenberg today about the keys to creating a culture of accountability, but so much more, because Dave is just a voracious advocate for radical accountability. He lives it, breathes it, and teaches people how to bring that culture of accountability in their organization and build much better teams and happier people, basically. So thanks for being here today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Damon.
Yes. I want to thank all the listeners that were out there hey, those of you that dropped the comments, we had Muhammad, we had a LinkedIn user. I can't see your name, but we had Robert and Usman that were dropping some comments in today. Thank you so much. Those that were listening but didn't drop a comment, appreciate you. Thanks for being here today. If you got into this late, go back to the beginning, because Dave dropped some serious gold nuggets about radical accountability, getting your team together the way you want to be, and personal development. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Dave. We'll be back again. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.